Okay, sounds good. This is the first talk, and I am really pleased to have Katie Cunningham here giving us a talk on A Noob Speaks to Noobs, your first site in the cloud. Everyone, give a round of applause to Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Cunningham. I'm a Python and Django developer at Cox Media Group. A little bit about me. I was always a dev, but I was never an op. Never had to set up servers. I never had to deploy my servers. I always had sysadmins and engineers doing it for me. So it was magic. I made code, they made it go on the web. It was really awesome. One day I was determined I was going to do it all on my own. I was going to administer my own site because I really wanted a personal site. So this is when I learned why I really needed to learn about server basics. I had a bulletin board. This is way back when this was cool to have a bulletin board. And one day I had a managed service provider, so they just made it happen for me. It was awesome. And I put in all these add-ons. It was great. And then one day there was a security issue, and they upgraded it, and it broke everything. I didn't have many users. I only had about 30 or 40 users, but these were my friends. These were people, I knew their kids, I knew their families, we had met. I was now trying frantically to get everything to work again, and I realized I didn't have the power. I had to basically scrap everything and start over again. That's when I learned I really didn't like managed service providers. I wanted control. So I decided I was going to learn Unix, and I was going to figure everything out. I picked up a book, and the first step was, this was hilarious, go in your house and find a spare computer and install Debian on it. I don't have a spare computer. I have my work laptop. That's it. And I have my gaming. I don't have towers speckled all over my house. This is not something I have a spare thing of. And then it was 20 pages, no lie, of how to resolve all the hardware issues. And I think I actually threw the book across the room after a very long weekend of not getting any farther and learning Unix basics. So eventually I moved to the cloud. Clouds are wonderful. They give you a server. It's all set up, but it's bare bones, and you have full control over it. That was why I decided I really liked deploying in the cloud, and I really didn't want to manage my own server. So first we're going to set some ground rules. When you have your own server, do not mess around on the server. If you log in, you should just be looking. Don't touch anything, don't change anything. Trust me, you will hate your life if you start changing things around. I cratered so many of my sites doing this. You don't test on production. This sounds like of course you wouldn't test on production, but it's very tempting at 2 a.m. when you've discovered something really cool and you're like, hey, you know what, I'll go ahead and try this out. You end up spending the rest of the weekend trying to back out and trying to figure out where everything went pear-shaped. You never push from your local. If you've changed a file in your local, you're like, oh, I'll change it here, I'll upload it. That can be dangerous because you'll see later you want to be able to rebuild your entire site from scratch with one press of a button. And you're going to change things one at a time. When I started it was very basic. And then I'd change one thing very carefully. I'd look for, if it had affected anything, then I would change the next thing. The reason I do this, I'm still not good at troubleshooting. I'm definitely not like the people that I work with that can look at some laws, oh yeah, this is what's going on, take this out, move this, and you have a permissions issue. I start getting glassy-eyed after very long. So some of the tools we'll be using. Fabric. Who has used Fabric? A good number of hands, not enough, but I'll see more hands by the end. You'll need a local Unix box. For a while, I developed on a Mac or Windows or whatever. I actually found that when I was learning, it was easier to start off with the same OS I was going to have out there. It just made things a lot easier. Now I'm a little more experienced and I can develop anywhere, and I figured out the issues, but that's a level of complexity you don't want, when you first start. Using Git and GitHub, you definitely want to pick some kind of repository. I use Git, I use GitHub, I like them, but there's Bitbucket, there's all kinds of things you should be using, Google Code, whatever, but have a repository somewhere that you're going to be saving things. So first we want to pick an OS. Some things you don't want to do. Don't be proud. There are operating systems out there that definitely give you some geek cred if you use them. If you're in this talk, you have not worked up to geek cred level. So pick one that works for you. Don't pick the one your significant other, the one you use at work, your neighbor uses, your Twitter friends use it, your favorite sites use it. They're not going to help you. I'm marrying a sysadmin. He still doesn't help me with my stupid site. He doesn't want to look at it at the end of the day. You know, like, I'm having issues with my security server. And he's just like, I can't, I've been doing this all day, I'm done. They're not going to help you. You're on your own. You use the one that works for you. If you can get your site running on Ubuntu, use Ubuntu. If you can get it using Debian or whatever, use that one. I use Ubuntu. It was the first thing that really worked for me, that had the best documents, you know, just for what I specifically wanted to do. There are other ones. That's the one I like. And that's the one I'll be using for the rest of this talk. So picking a provider. Some of the things you want to look for, make sure it has the OS you've decided to use. I made this mistake once. I went to a provider and I'm like, oh crap, you don't use one I'm familiar with. Well, I'm sure I can get around it. No, it was really painful. Make sure you actually can SSH into the box. Some of providers that are out there, they hide the fact that they're managed service providers. If you ask them, can I get to my box? Can I SSH to it? And they say no, you don't want to go there. Make sure you have root access. This is very important. You're going to be managing your box. If you don't have root access, you're not managing your box. You're asking permission. And you want the ability to clone your instance. They call this different things on service providers, but if you actually just call the 1-800 number or get in their web chat or something and say, can I clone it? Yeah, you can clone it. We call it this. They all have a different name for it. Here's some providers. There's even more. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just 4 things I threw up there that came off the top of my head. If you go into the vendor area, I counted like 5 more. So go talk to some of them. You know, ask them these questions. I use Rackspace. Before we get going, we need to think about how we're going to serve the site. If you're just a developer, you've probably never had to serve your site. I use Django. I've used Clone, and they're always development servers, and you run the server, or you do the build out, and it just runs it automatically, and it's beautiful. You don't have to worry about how you're going to serve it to another person. And there's a lot of choices with this. You can use Apache, all these other things. I use Apache and ModWhiskey because I'm too lazy to move over to anything else, and I have very small sites. This works for me. There are ones that do do better caching, or they're cooler. These work. Setting up Apache, you need to actually have the files for Apache, but it's easier. I mean, I thought it was really complicated, and then I had somebody sit down, and it's 2 files. That's it. You have mysite.whiskey. This is going to be put somewhere else later on the site for Apache to read, because ModWhiskey helps you serve Python applications. And these, all you're doing is saying where it is, where we need to append the Python path, where our settings are, do some imports and stuff, and all the rest is just craft. The only things you're changing, that line and that line, that's it. And we'll get into that later. Virtual host. I use virtual host because I'm cheap, and I don't want to have a server for every site. So I usually have a couple of sites on each server. And these are really easy. It's an email address, it's your server name, it's another name for your server, where you actually have like your Django site. And this is for Django, but this will work for other Pyramid and whatever. This will work for many others. Plone is the only exception. Plone is special. So you need to look at the Plone docs, but the Plone docs are good for serving. Your log level, how quickly do you want your log files filled. You have to give it a WSGI daemon that's basically serving. And the only thing you have to worry about there is my user, whatever your username is going to be. Where your script is, where your media is, which is very important if you actually want to have CSS, where the admin media is if you don't want to piss off your admins, and that's pretty much it. So getting the server, this is actually super easy. You go through a web interface, but it's super easy. Go into Rackspace, you log in, you go to cloud servers, you click add server, you pick your OS. This is always the part where I would stop and think, because you can get different sizes, and it's a little hard to see there, but it tells you over on the side how much it costs, but it's per second. And I'm sitting there going, crap, how much is that? What does that even mean? Well, basically the smallest one is about $10 a month, and it goes up to maybe 12 if you have more days in the month. But it's a cheap option, but it's always given me a little bit of a stopping, like, oh God, how much is this gonna cost? I don't like my sites to suddenly cost $100. You're going to create it, and it's going to give you a password. Seriously, save that password. Okay, I have so many times closed that and gone, what's that password? Crap, did I actually write it down? And I have to rebuild the entire server again, or wait for the email to come through, and sometimes the email doesn't come through. And yay, it's done. You have a site, and you have a server. Yay, look at that. So some words about this server. The first time I logged into the server and started playing around, it's super bare bones. There's nothing installed, like at all. I was used to these beautifully well-built servers. They gave me nothing. It was like the harsh reality that being a sysadmin is hard. And of course I had all my sysadmins laughing at me. Yeah, that's why we have to come in every day. Setting up the server, you have this shiny new server. So let's log in, let's install things. No, we are not logging in. We're not screwing around with the server yet. We're starting this the right way. We're going to make a Fabric script. Because the first Fabric script I make is always to set up the server. Just get my site on the server, because Fabric will save you. If you ever crater your site, if something bad happens, you can get your site back up quickly. It does lots of things. Fabric is cool if you start reading into it. I use 3 commands. I've seen really complex Fabric scripts. All I use is sudo, which means do this on the server, local, do this on my machine, and take a file from my local and put it on the remote machine. You install this on your local. It doesn't actually go on your server. This I found confusing when somebody first explained Fabric to me. It just goes on your local where you're going to be deploying from. And it looks kind of crafty, but basically it's, fab, what file am I going to be running, what host, that'll be either mysite.com or your IP address, minus you and your user. The first time you run this as root. There are no other users on your fancy new server. And which function you want to run. So servers, we're going to do all these things. That's the quick list of what we're going to have to do. So we need to set up some packages. We need Apache. I was like, why wouldn't you put Apache on a server just automatically? But apparently some people don't need it, or they use something different. This is really bare bones. Subversion, because I do occasionally have to check things out of Subversion from the remote machine. SQLite 3. Doesn't come with the machine. If you're going to use Django, you have to install whatever you're going to be using as your database. Python setup tools, these are some good things to have. Git, we're going to be using Git. I kind of like having these on the machine. It makes life easier, and of course we're going to have to install ModWhiskey. So let's get our server ready. We're going to be setting up the server, and this is very simple. Basically, you're going to take all the packages I just showed you, and for each one, go install it. And don't bug me. That -y is so very important. If you forget it, you hate life. And that's why I love doing it in a script, because then I never forget it. It just means don't bug me. I don't care. Download everything. Add a user, because we don't run as root, do we? No. I tried that one time. I'm like, oh, that root thing, that's stupid. I'll just go ahead and run as root. No, everything was screwed up. Nothing would work. You want to add a user for yourself. So all it's doing is basically touching a local file called passwords. It's adding a user remotely. It's adding it to sudoers, so this is going to be a person with sudo rights. Creates a password, sets their password, and then puts it in the file on your local. So now you have your username and your password on your local. So you actually don't have to remember what it says here, because I will forget to write that down and I'll clear my console. Need to install your pip things. Right now we only have one thing. So why bother with this? Because your list of pip things is going to grow. I'm pip installing Django. My current site has a pip list of 20 things. If I ever blow out my server, things I just have to go reinstall. So it's not done yet. We have to move some files. Basically, we're going to be checking out the files that you dutifully checked into Subversion or Git or Bitbucket. Because the reason is, if you start changing things on your local, it gets really easy to get out of sync. And I've said it many times, I'll check it in later, don't worry about it. I never check it in. And then I build on top of that old file. And then I'm like, where did my CSS go? Why is this not working? And that file is long since gone because I've cleaned it out, and I have to go recreate all my work. So I never, ever push from local. I always check out from wherever I checked it into. So all this is doing is making like a nice little temporary directory on the server, doing some cleanup because this is something that will run many times. I check it out, I make a tar file, and then I push it up. So now the file's up there, and then I go ahead and untar it. So all my files are ready. They're ready to be moved. And there's more setup. We need to place the files. The files are on the server, but they're not in the right place. And this, I don't know why I separate this out this way. I just like separating these. So basically it's taking, it's moving some of my setup files, which is all the Apache files that I dutifully checked into my Git repo. It's adding, my WSGI file. And it blanked out a bunch of them. Basically, you're going to have to move your template somewhere. You're going to have to move your media. You're going to have to move things into the correct location. These two services, you're going to have to start some services. And A2EN site, which I've never known how to pronounce, all it's doing is copying your WSGI file from one area to another, doing a symlink. And it just says, now we have this file. And then you need to restart Apache too. That's my rule, is like, I always restart Apache. If I make changes, just go ahead, bump the, restart Apache. Well, I've run into issues, people saying, well, I don't need to restart Apache because the documentation says I don't have to restart Apache. Documentation lies because it was written by us and we're liars. So just don't trust it. Restarting Apache doesn't hurt anything. Just go ahead and do it. And if it does hurt something, maybe you need to have, you have worse issues, So we're done, woohoo! We have a site, do it again. Delete your slice, run everything again. Because I ran into this a few times when I was helping people, something went wrong. What did they do? Did they fix the Fabric script? No. They went on the server and did things by hand. And they forgot about it. So they went and we moved them back, and it's like, no, fix your Fabric script. If anything goes wrong, fix it there, rerun it. Do this until your script runs to completion and you have a website and you, in your browser, open up the IP address and you have it going. Until you get to that point, do not, think you're done. So updates, eventually you're going to want to update. This is where you want to be able to clone your server. I love cloning servers because it gives you a perfect match to the server you have now, and you can mess with it all you want. You can screw things up, you can test deployments, you can send it to people and say, what do you think of this? Now they are charging you, but they're charging you by the second. So usually, I had one up for like a few days and forgot about it. It was $3. I spend more on coffee. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to create an image of your site. This actually takes a while. Even if you have a teeny tiny, I was testing it earlier, teeny tiny nothing site, it takes a while because they have to queue it. So you're going to name the image, name it something sensible, and you make a new server. You go back just like you did, click add server, but they're going to allow you to create it from an image. Once again, you pick the size, pick the smallest, and now you're ready. You have a perfect clone of the server, and now you can push your updates to that first and test them because once again, you're using a fab file. Now, I don't have time to go over an update fab file because we are running short. I was going to pull up the actual fab file. I'll be happy to show it to anybody later. But basically, you want a function that will update your CSS and your media and your templates. That is something I use like every other day because I'm always tweaking stuff. You want to be able to install a new library. I highly recommend having just a core file you pull from that says, okay, these are all my libraries, and I'm going to install the new one. You want to be able to update your settings file because that happens. You have to update it, you have to add something to it. Usually I just change it, check it in, and have it re-uploaded. always restart your services. There's the 2 services I showed you, I always restart those, no matter what. They don't damage anything, they can't restart badly. So just go ahead, restart Apache. So some next steps for you, try swapping out elements. I pointed to a bunch of different ways to serve your website. Try one, but try it on your clone. But now you have a chance, but change things one at a time. That's a really cool thing to play with. Caching. The caching is kind of cool. You can put in things like, squid or varnish or things like that. If you really feel like you're going to need caching, try it. Try memcache. This is not a secure site yet. We do not have HTTPS. This is very basic, so research that. Try to figure out how to get that going. That's actually deceptively hard. And attach a domain to your server, which is kind of important eventually. You probably want to not be giving out your IP address over and over, but attach a domain. And that is it. That's my talk. Do we have any questions? Yes, we have a microphone here, so you might want to come up.
One here too.
Is it on? That one.
Yeah.
It's a really quick question. Are you going to share out the Fabric files and some of the things?
Yes, I will. I wish I had time. All of my slides corrupted on my flight over, and I did 24 hours to recreate all my slides.
Okay, would love to see them.
Thank you. Oh, okay, I do? Cool. I will show you. I have my fab files. They're just not in the slides. Let's see. Don't want to show you that. Where'd they go? Oh, there they are. This. There we go. This, as soon as I get it up, this is my ridiculously large update file. This is from a recent update. As you see, I usually give the name of the file in the directory. This is not something that's this is just me. I do this because I like to see that the file name and the directory separate, just because when I'm working, I tend to be more familiar with the file name I'm working with, and when I see yada yada slash yada yada, my eyes gray out. And I have done that where I've uploaded the wrong file and I'm hitting refresh and trying to figure out why my file didn't upload, and I just uploaded the wrong file. So I put my file name first. You don't have to do that, and that's just because I have weird vision issues. You'll see I have also checkout apps. There's one app I use that does not have, and when I find him, I'm going to make sure he gets in PyPy, so I can now pip install him because he's the last lone person I can't do that for. But we have here's the app get install. You saw that. The pip installs. This is one, getDB. My getDB is for when I want to get my production database down to my local. All this does is it grabs the file that I have and pulls it down and then puts it in the right place and backs up the one I have locally. Sometimes I need to do stuff on my database, or I need to double check something. There are times when I really don't want a blog post to go out early, but I need to make sure it looks right, and I need to make sure I'm testing my feeds and stuff. And one thing you never want to do, don't screw with your feeds on production, because then you will totally slam Planet Python, and people will hate you because you'll have 30 articles in Planet Python. You have a question?
A request. As somebody that helps out on Fabric, will you post this to GitHub?
Yes, I will.
As a repository that's an example that people could contribute ideas to? Yes,
I will. I actually meant to, as I said before the talk, but I was kind of busy, making slides. Some other things, placing files, and I don't know why those were whited out, but all it's doing, it's moving the files. That's it. That's all I want to care about. Move it to this directory, and this is just my weird setup for my files, is because this was literally, I was grabbing my hair, and I finally found the one thing that worked, the one walkthrough that took me from step 1 to step 10. Because one of the funny things about when developers and sysadmins and engineers write instructions, they skip steps. They skip step 1, 3, 7, and 9. It's they skip random steps, and they don't tell you where to start. Or they don't tell you, oh, of course you have to install Apache before you start it. And I just read that and I assumed, oh, well, Apache must already be installed. Cool. but I don't know which Apache to install. I didn't realize there was, it's like, okay, there's two. How old are these instructions? Is this like a really old guy that's probably still like using some arcane version? And it's like, you know. But anyway, this was the first one that worked, so I copied his directory structure exactly, because I got tired of typos. So that's why it's my Django. It's stupid, I need to redo it. But since I'm the only person on my server, I don't really care yet. And get files just basically takes out the files, creates a nice little tar file that I can move around. I actually, because my site is small, I just take out all the files. I could check out individual files, but it was a level of complexity that seemed really silly when I already was placing individual files. Somebody suggested once, why don't you just take the latest files that you've checked in? I'm like, obviously you do not know how I work. I have half-finished files in my repo occasionally because, yes, we should only check in when we're ready, but sometimes I have to check in because dinner's ready. And I have to check it in, and my kids are around. I really don't want them to destroy my laptop and all the work I've done for the past 2 hours. So sometimes I just check in just because I'm really worried that something will happen. Same thing for services, but basically you run deploy. This here it's deploy one because occasionally I do have to do deploy one, deploy two. Like deploy this, I have to do something else. Like if I have to start a service somewhere else on some site by hand, I'll have to do that. But this one, all it's doing, it's, you know, what is this? It's doing whatever the apt-get I need to install, all the new stuff. Do some pip installs, you know, get your files and put your files. You know, it's pretty simple. And it's long, but it's actually really, really simple. And anybody that's worked on a Mac even can understand a lot of these Unix commands. It's just putting it together was very difficult. It took me a while until I could successfully maintain my own site. How are we on time? Huh? Any more questions? Yes. You need to buy. Oh, I'll repeat your question.
I play with local servers. One of my fears with getting a hosting account like this is that I'll mess it up and a bot will take over and I'll be responsible for high traffic.
No, because they do, his question was he's worried that somebody's going to slam the server and he's going to get a bill for like $300. And I almost had this once back in the day. One of the nice things about the new servers is they will cap you and they won't keep charging you. They'll just shut down your site. And you can actually set up things. Like I use Google Analytics. And Google Analytics will watch how many hits I'm getting. And if I start getting an absurd number of hits, it emails me. And it says, something weird is going on. You need to go look at your site now. Granted, the only time that happened was when I got Reddited one day. And it was ridiculously low. It was so pathetic. My threshold was like 300 hits in a day, which is so sadly low. And I'm like, and Google was like freaking out at me. And I think I'm getting, you know, attacked. And I look over and it's like, oh, it was just Reddit. I guess they liked something I posted. Okay, cool. But that was really the only time. But it is nice. I keep it reasonably low. Like I expect so many hits. But if I go double above that, please alert me and let me know. And then you can do stuff about it. You could always just shut down the server until the botnet attack stops, bring it up, investigate why. I mean, chances are with the puny little sites most of us are probably going to be creating, if you're worried about that kind of stuff, you're probably not going to be important enough for that. And if it is, it's probably fleeting. If you're really, really, really worried, look into some kind of caching service that you could go to. I don't know what the cheap version of Akamai would be, but look into something like that. Any more questions?
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Kate.